Hello church, welcome to another midweek update from your pastor. I hope you're doing well on this Wednesday. We are making our way through the Easter season. This coming Sunday is Palm Sunday, and it is a very important week in the lives of Christians all over the world because it marks the beginning of Holy Week. Here at our church, we'll have a special worship service that morning. Actually, we're going to have two worship services this coming Sunday morning at 9:30 and at 11. And the 9:30 service will be our normal service like we've been having that you're already accustomed to. But this weekend, our youth are going to be engaged in what we're calling the Spring Thing. And so they will have a special worship service on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Our youth and our youth ministry and all those who are working with them over the weekend. In fact, they will have several worship services throughout the weekend. So I just invite you to pray for them and for that very strategic time in their lives. And we're grateful for Kurt Crodel and Chelsea and our team as they lead our youth during these strategic days. So on Palm Sunday, our children will get palm branches when they come in for the worship service, and we will just highlight this incredible story of Jesus making his way into Jerusalem. And then each day during Holy Week, Monday through Saturday at noon, we'll be premiering a video that's actually sponsored by Engage Arlington, which is an organization that we're a part of. It's a group of churches here in our community who are trying to engage our city with the gospel. And so there are representative pastors from all across Arlington each day during Holy Week that will share a devotional word, a word of encouragement to the people of Arlington. And they'll be representing South Arlington and Southeast, Southwest, North Arlington, Central Arlington, Downtown Arlington. So these pastors whose churches are located across our city will be delivering a message every single day this week, or during Holy Week rather, just to call us to a time of reflection and remembrance. And we will be talking about the blessing of Easter all the way through Holy Week. And then for us as a church, we'll gather on Good Friday of next week at 6 o'clock for a worship service here in our sanctuary. And then on Easter Sunday, we'll have two worship services, one at 9:30 and one at 11. So we're looking forward to celebrating Easter with you as a church family. And I'm grateful for all the folks that are working so hard to make all that a possibility for us. As you know, the work is ongoing here on our buildings. Our renovation and our repair work are taking place side by side. So I ask you to keep those folks in your prayers also as we try to get our buildings prepared and ready, ultimately to fill them up with people. That's certainly our goal. So thank you for your patience and your prayers about all that. Well, you know, we're reading through the Gospel of Mark in our Easter journey this year, and Believe the Good News is our theme. And this week in our daily Bible readings, we've been reading through Mark 8 and Mark 9 and Mark 10, and Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem in our readings today. You get to the end of Mark 8 and through Mark 9 and Mark 10. Most scholars believe there's a transition there in Mark's account where Jesus is now leaving Galilee and he's making his way to Jerusalem. Next week, we'll begin in Mark 11 where Jesus actually arrives in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. And we'll spend next week, Holy Week, looking at the various things that happen in the life of Jesus during that very powerful and pivotal week in his life and in the life of the church. But I wanted to point your attention today to a very famous story in Mark's Gospel. In fact, Matthew and Luke also tell this story, and it's in Mark's version, it's found in Mark 9, and it's the story of the Transfiguration. In Mark 9, verse 2, Mark says, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. And there he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He didn't know what to say because they were so frightened. And then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him. Well, this powerful, unforgettable story takes place as Jesus is on his way now to Jerusalem, and he's told the disciples several times that he will offer up his life there as a ransom for the sinfulness of humanity. The disciples didn't quite understand it. We think that Simon Peter was the chief source for Mark and his material in his gospel. In fact, the early church father, Papias, says that Mark gathered his material from the sermons of Simon Peter as he traveled with him. And there are some indications that that seems to be true. We know Mark wasn't one of the disciples, but he has this material that feels like eyewitness kind of material. So for example, when he quotes Peter in verse 5, he then adds this in parenthesis, verse 6. Peter didn't know what to say. They were so frightened. Well, that sounds like something Peter would have told Mark, that he remembers that. They weren't sure what to do in that moment. But in the Transfiguration, what happened was these three disciples, Peter, James, and John, were given just a glimpse of the majesty of Christ. They knew Him as a human being. They were living with Him. They walked with Him. They had no problem believing that Jesus was fully human. They experienced life with Him in His humanity. But in this moment, they had a brief glimpse of His divinity. And He was transfigured. He was changed in appearance right before their very eyes. And the clothes He had on will be dazzling in brilliance. And the robes that He was wearing just were so white. Mark says you couldn't launder them that way. And there was Moses and Elijah, these two great heroes of the faith. And so just imagine that scene for these Jewish men, Peter, James, and John, to see their teacher, their master, transfigured like that in front of them, and then to see the two heroes of the Old Testament, the man who represented the prophets, Elijah, and the lawgiver, Moses, having a conversation with Jesus, and then a cloud covering that like the glory of God had come upon them, and they hear God's voice speak about Jesus and that they are to listen to Him. What a memorable, incredible experience that must have been. Now, if you'll fast forward just a little bit later, we'll find Jesus experience a different type of expression of His glory, and that's exactly how John presents the cross. It is an expression of the glory of God on display when Jesus is offering up His life as a ransom for our sins. The scene will be very different then. It'll be contrasted with this one. The clothes of Jesus will be dripping with blood. Instead of being surrounded by Moses and Elijah, He's going to be between two thieves. And instead of the voice of God saying, "This is my Son," it'll be a Roman soldier who will say, "Surely this man was the Son of God." So these two scenes where you have on the one hand the glory and the majesty of Christ, on the other hand you have the suffering of Christ, well, they both are part of the story. And they both are very much a part of the gospel message that we proclaim to our world. And so as we start to make our way toward Easter this year, both of those have to be in our minds. On the one hand, the majesty of Christ. Simon Peter will write about that in 2 Peter 1, starting in about verse 16 or so. He'll say, we were eyewitnesses of the majesty of Christ on that mountain. We've never forgotten it. But Peter was also there when Jesus was captured and He was taken to trial. And so they also understood the very sufferings of Jesus that are a part of this story. So for me and you, as we're making our way toward Easter, I guess I want to ask us both to pause and contemplate both of these truths. On the one hand, the story of Easter is about the majesty of Christ, the glorified Christ. Ultimately, He will be resurrected from the dead, and He will be dazzling and brilliant in His appearance. And the disciples will not even know how to respond to Him as they were on the Mount of Transfiguration. But this story also includes the suffering of Christ, and that is His willingness to offer up His life for us as a ransom for our sin. He's an example for us of what it means to continue to do the will of God, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, even when suffering is a part of the journey. Jesus is our finest example of that. The writer of Hebrews says, "For the joy set before Him, He endured the cross. He despised its shame." And so that is very much a part of the story also. But it's not just the suffering of Christ, it's the atoning work of Christ that has power for us even to this day. So I'm praying for you as you make your way toward Holy Week, that God will impress upon your hearts the truths that are contained in Mark's Gospel, and that you will be impressed, enamored with, touched by the majesty of Christ, but you'll also be inspired by His suffering. So just know I'm praying for you, as we find our way toward Holy Week and then ultimately to Good Friday and then finally to Easter Sunday. So God bless you, and I hope to see you soon.